of mastering student behavior? Well, I'm going to give it to you in this video right here. So in this video, I'm going to break down for you just the 3 main components, plus I'm going to get a little bit extra at the end, of how you can really bring that behavior down into a functional thing for your classroom that's going to benefit everybody. So, I mean, let's start here. Let's dive into it. So here are the 3 things, by the way: expectations, accountability, and consistency. If you get those 3 things in and you lock those in, you're going to see great results in your class. Now, give me 1 second to kind of look over here since we're doing a live, and that way if there's anything I need to respond to, I can respond to. But here we go. So first of all, expectations. Now, I have this course on classroom management, 20 days classroom transformation. In fact, if you want that course, I'll make sure I put it down in the description, 20-day classroom management transformation. Also down in the description, if you want to join our community, teaching community, that'll be down there for you as well. But please, anything I can do to help you out, do not hesitate to reach out. But in that classroom management course that I have, I start off by asking, what kind of classroom do you want? That's how we start off. What classroom do you want? Now, you got to be able to answer that question, because if you don't, how's that saying go? I remember it's an old country song, old country song. It went like this: if you don't stand for anything, you're going to fall for everything. Now think about that. If you don't stand for anything, you're going to fall for everything. Now, as teachers, we fall into this trap so many times we fall into this trap where we're like, yeah, I want a good classroom, right? But we never really define what that good classroom is. We just don't. I mean, we think we know what it is, and we've seen shows, or we hear about it, and we know a lot of times what we don't want. But what do you want? That's the thing you really want to dive into. What kind of classroom do you really want? And so that's the first thing to really hone in. So I'll give you an example in my classroom. There's a lot of things I really want my classroom how to function, but an example would be one thing I really define in my mind. In fact, I would highly recommend you actually write these out, is when I'm speaking, I want these students to be quiet. That's one thing I want. And so that is an expectation I have. And so you got to go through every little part of your class, every little part, and think to yourself, what do I really want from my class? And then once you're able to define what you really want from your class, then you can put things together that works towards those goals. But that is the first thing, is know what your expectations are. Set that bar, wherever that bar is for you. And it's different for other people. It really is. I've been to mentor for different teachers, and I would go into their class and I would see things that would just make me cringe. And that's because I have a different expectation than they have. And so each person is different, but I call it a threshold. You got to know what the threshold is. You got to know what is the worst thing, or what's the worst? What will you put down as a thing it cannot get past this point, or I don't want it to get past this point. And then that leads into the second part, which is accountability. You gotta hold students accountable. You gotta hold students accountable. I mean, students are no different than us. I mean, think about us, for example. We have our speed limit. I don't know about you, we have a speed limit. And on the speed limit, sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes I go beyond that speed limit. And when I go beyond that speed limit, the only thing that kind of pulls me back most times is the thought, I wonder if there's an officer around the corner. In fact, I have it on my phone, the maps on my phone. It actually will prompt me, speed check ahead. And that's amazing. Just that little prompt slows me down, because I know there's going to be accountability. I know that there's a consequence or a response to my actions. And because of that, I alter my behavior. I mean, that's kind of how it comes down to. And so with that said, students are the exact same way, and so keep that in mind, that being the fact that students are the exact same way, how do you keep them accountable? What do you do to keep them accountable? Now, for me, what I do, and if you ever came into my classroom, I've been doing this job for 20-something years. And actually, I got this from a teacher, I think it was like second year of teaching. He kind of gave me this thing. In fact, let me see if I can grab it real fast here for you. But it's my seating chart, all right? And so I have my seating chart on this clipboard. And I always walk around with this clipboard. And what I'm doing on this clipboard is I'm keeping track of things. I'm keeping track of how many times students use the restroom. I'm keeping track of how many times students go to nurse. I'm keeping track if they ever have electronic devices. I'm keeping track of every time they raise their hand to participate. I'm keeping track of their behavior. I'm keeping track of everything on this board. It's the accountability part. That's what it comes down to. It's the accountability part. And I'll give you an example of how this plays out. Is for my class, I have a rule is you can't have more than 3 passes per quarter. I limit my passes 3 per quarter. And so a student will come and ask me, hey, can I use the restroom? And I'll usually say, sure, yeah, no problem, go ahead. How many passes do you get? And they'll say 3. Okay, cool, go ahead, go to the restroom. Second time they come to me, I'll say, hey, can I use the restroom? I'm like, this is your second time. Are you sure you want to go? Because we got like 5 weeks left. Now, I don't want there to be an emergency where you really got to go and you can't go. Do you really want to? And they'll think about it. Sometimes they say yes, and sometimes they say no. And then the third time will come, and they'll say, hey, can I go to the restroom? I say, ew, this is your 3rd pass. Are you really sure you want to use it? Because anything after this, you won't go. The fact that I'm keeping track of it, the fact I'm able to recite back to the students exactly how many passes they have used, it gets them to think, to really question, do they really have to go to a restroom? Because more often than not, you know how it is. More often than not, students just want to get out of the class, right? Who doesn't want to get out of the class, right? And so more often than not, students just want to get out of the class. And so they use that as a way of getting out of the class. And so with that said, by me holding students accountable to it, they have to second guess or they have to think to themselves, this is something I really want to do. Now, it's accountability. That's all it is. Now, that's just a small thing in my life. That's just one thing. That's just like the restroom, right? But this applies to everything. If you have a certain, once again, back to my idea of how, when I'm speaking, I expect students to be quiet. It is one thing for me to say, but if I don't hold students accountable to that, then what's the point, right? What is the point? And they're going to quickly learn that there's no accountability. And then once they learn there's no accountability, it's just a slippery slope from there. So accountability is huge. You got to hold kids accountable to it, right? And I love, man, this is, where did I hear this saying at? Where did I hear? I'm trying to think where I heard the saying at. But it goes something like this. For a classroom culture, for any organization, for a group, right? If you're talking about creating a culture, it goes like this. Culture is not created by what we celebrate. It's created by what we tolerate. So if you want the culture of your class to be academically focused, if you want it to be supportive, if you want it to be respectful, if you want it to be kids are attentive, whatever culture you're seeking for your classroom, you get there not necessarily by the celebrations. I mean, they're great. I definitely would do some celebrations. But the reality is you get there by what you tolerate. And so if you say no students are talking when I'm talking and you let that go, then you're going to have problems. There is culture being damaged by that. So please keep that in mind. Please keep that in mind. Now, once again, let me say that quote again because I love the quote. Culture is not created by what we celebrate, but culture is created by what we tolerate. All right. So we got expectations. Got to make sure you know where those are at for you. Accountability. You got to hold students accountable. And the third one here, and I'll be honest with you, I've coached a lot of teachers, and this is where most teachers fall down. And this is where I fell down several years. I mean, you won't believe it, but it's true. It took me about 7 years to be comfortable being a teacher. The first 2, 3, 4 years were awful. And it wasn't until about year 7 that I finally became comfortable being a teacher. And so with that said, just keep that in mind. It may be a process for you. But where I fell down, where most teachers fall down, is this. And that is the consistency part of it. That is a consistency part. Most teachers fall down on the consistency. Here's a number for you. Oh, here's a number. Hope it doesn't scare you away. But it's going to take 3 weeks. 3 weeks to bring the class where you want it to be at. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of being consistent. Can you handle it? I don't know. Oh, hold on a second. You know how it is, right? Automatic lights. So real fast, there's some people that I'm doing a live here, so if I missed you, I apologize. A couple people said hi, so hi. How you doing? Hey, by the way, if you're live, you need anything, especially if you're a teacher, just put it in the comments. I'll definitely get back to you. I'll respond to it here. But back to what I was saying, being consistent, 3 weeks. So it's, imagine this, first day, and I say this for the very first day of school. This is the best time to do it, but you could do it anytime. Kids do not respond to what you say. They respond to what you do. I can say in my class that you need to show up on time. I can say that. And I can tell them, for me, attendance is important. For me, it's a sign of respect. Whatever I want to say, I can say it over and over and over again. But if I'm not holding students accountable to that, and I'm letting that go, and my actions do not match up with what I said, students will pick up on that. And they'll pick up on it 1 day, 2 days, that's it. It takes them about, in my opinion again, about 3 weeks of being consistent before it really sticks, before students really get the message that you're not messing around, before students really believe. Oh, I had another friend that said this. He says, do you really believe what you say you believe? And if you do, you got to be consistent. Now, I'm the first to say that is hard. Oh my God, especially if you're a new teacher, because a new teacher, or any teacher itself, you're juggling 1,000 things, right? You're juggling behavior, social emotional learning, your lesson planning, meetings. You got so many things on your plate. And sometimes you're just, that energy tank is just depleted, right? And so it is hard for a lot of times for us to be consistent with what we say we're going to do. But I'm going to tell you right now, that consistency will pay off. My class, the course that I offer, it's called 20-Day Classroom Transformation. And the big part of it is that consistency. That is it. I spend most of the videos talking about what you got to do, but the reality is none of it means anything unless you do it and you stick with it. So that is the key. Once you know exactly what you want and you hold students accountable, you got to be in it for the long haul. And if you want a number, 3 weeks is what it is. You got to lock in for those 3 weeks. You got to buckle up. You're going to put some extra time and energy into it. You got to put everything into that behavior function of your class. And if you do that, you see tremendous results. Now, those are things you got to do, but I'm gonna give you a little bit more here. So stay with me here. It's not just about what you do. It's also about how you do it. How's that saying go? It's not what you say, it's how you say it. That can make a huge difference. So these are things you got to do in your classroom if you want your classroom to run properly regarding behavior. But how you do it, this is a little bit harder. And for a long time, I was trying to figure, you know what I'm talking about, first of all. If you go into different classes, YM, I'm not sure what that means, YM, looking at the chats here. But if you go to different classes, you will see that some classes that the teacher just has it, right? And you go to other classes and the teacher doesn't have it. And so I'm trying, in all my years, especially when I started this YouTube channel 4 years ago, because I'm trying to break down how to help out teachers. How do you define it, right? How do you define it? I don't know. What is it? And so that it is that thing that you have as a teacher that is able to have good classroom management. It's that thing you have where you can lead a class. And so I thought long and hard about it, and I tried to find what it was. And then I realized it's more or less the attitude that you have. And what is that attitude? It's this. The attitude is calm, assertive. That's what it is, calm, assertive. So what is calm, assertive? And by the way, where I got this from, and by all means, I'm not saying that students are animals and like that, but where I got this from is my wife and I were watching Cesar Millan. A while ago, my wife was doing doggy daycare, and me and her worked together in her business and helping her. And so at one point in time, oh God, I remember this so well, she would have dogs come into our house. And at one point in time, we had the most was 15 dogs in the house at one single time. And the beautiful thing about it is that they all got along. Now, think about this. Now, I'm not sure if you're a dog person, but think about it. 15 dogs all getting along. How do you pull that off? And it's very hard to do. And we had everything from a little wiener doggy, a little chihuahua, all the way to a Great Dane and everything in between. And I give my wife a lot of credit on this one. She ran that show. It was amazing to see her do her stuff. But so we watched Cesar Millan to kind of get tips and tricks and all this other stuff. And he mentioned calm, assertive. And I realized that's it. That is it. Calm, assertive. So these are things you got to do, right? You got to have your expectations, accountability. You got to be consistent. But how you do things is with a calm, assertive attitude. Easier said than done. Trust me, there's been times where I haven't been calm, assertive. There's been times where I just got wigged out, right? We all have as teachers. You get wigged out. But what does that mean, that calm, assertive? It means that in situations, especially when students are trying, and you know this if you're a teacher, students will try to trigger you, right? Students will try to trigger you. And so what you got to do is you got to learn to respond to that. Now, usually if you get triggered, and usually if student says something to you, the immediate response is to kind of bark back, right? It's kind of to respond back. But that doesn't get you to the ultimate goal. Because once again, the ultimate goal is to change student behavior. And if you get in a power struggle with a student, it's never going to end well. It's not, right? So how do you deal with it? The answer is calm, assertive. And now, if you're new to this game and new to this, what I would recommend is maybe coming up with some scripts. Think beforehand. Before a situation actually happens, think to yourself, how do you want to respond for it? Once again, I have the luxury of doing this 20-something years, so I have the luxury of knowing a situation in the past where I messed up and what didn't work to finally get to the point where I know what actually works in my class. But if you don't have that luxury yet, think about it ahead of schedule. How am I going to respond if a student says this? What am I going to do if a student does this? Right? And create some sort of scripts in your mind. A real easy thing that I would recommend, and I got this from a recent podcast and actually a book my wife is diving into about communication, is take the I out of it. Take the you out of it and replace it with the I. So for example, let's say a student is putting down another student in your class, bullying, right? You could say, hey, don't you do that in class? Or hey, don't say that to Johnny. But if you direct it to the student as you can't do this in this class, and you know how it is. If someone tells you you can't do this, your immediate response is, yes, I can, try me, all right? And students are the same way. You can't do this. The only outcome of that is they get defensive. There's a chance that they may okay, whatever, but more often they get defensive. So replace that with the I. Say, I cannot allow that in this class, all right? So I'm not saying you're bad or you doing this or that. I'm saying, hey, as a teacher, I can't allow this in the class. Students are walking around your class. Students are throwing things in your class. Stop throwing things in class. You can't throw things in a class. How many times have I told you I throw things in class? What's the outcome going to be? Most likely some friction. But if you say, hey, I can't allow you to do that in class because it's dangerous, that's a different thing. So just a script like this, something small like that can make a huge difference when it comes to dealing with students. Now, I want to make sure you understand. It's not going to cure everything. It's not going to cure everything, but you learn to tweak things here and there. You learn to use things for your classroom that fit you, but with that, overall, it helps the overall function of your class. So 3 things so far, and I got one more coming your way here. Once again, you got to have your expectations, right? You got to hold students accountable. You got to be consistent with your actions, not what you're just saying, but what you're doing. The way you approach students is calm, assertive. But here's the last thing I want to leave you with. It's the 10-80-10 rule. If you understand the 10-80-10 rule, it's going to give you a goal to hit for, a goal to reach for. If you understand the 10-80-10 rule, it relieves a lot of the pressure because you're saying you don't have to be perfect. You understand that no class is going to be perfect. It just isn't. So the 10-80-10 rule goes like this, and actually applies to all different kind of groups of people. In a business, there's a 10-80-10 rule. And it goes like this. In a business, you have 10% of the people that are always focused, always working, carrying the company, doing great. You have 10% of the people in a company that are kind of bringing down the company, kind of ruining the culture of the company. And then you have about 80% of the people that are kind of just going along with the flow. Now, the secret is this: the 80% will go depending upon the overall culture of the group, right? So your goal in your class shouldn't be to get all the students doing exactly what they need to do every single time with no behavior issues, because that's not going to happen. It just isn't. Once again, doing it a long time, it doesn't happen in my class. But your goal in your mind should be, you know what? If I can get 90% of students moving in the right direction, then that is a win. So think about your own class for a second. Think about your own class. Here you go. I have 30 students in my class. 30 students. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, got it. That means 3 of my students are, no matter who is in that class as a teacher, no matter who's a teacher in that class, 3 of my students in that class would excel. No problems behavior whatsoever. Great academic, you name it. It doesn't make a difference who the teacher is, they would do great because they're that top 10%. Then you have 10% of your students in my class, about 3 students that on a routine basis, I have to put a little more extra effort into regarding behavior. Who knows what that is exactly? It could be disruptive, could be defiant behavior, it could be, you name it, right? But there's that 3%, or that 3 kids, that 10%. And then the other big bulk of it, that 80%, right? The 3 kids, 10%. The big bulk of it is the 80% of students. The rest of them, the 24 kids. How they're going to go depends upon how I control the class. It depends upon how I deal with that 10%, those 3 kids. It depends upon how I respond to those kids that are part of that 80%, or make sure I do my math right, part of that 80%, if I'm consistent with them. And you will see this, and you'll know this. If you go into a class, you can tell if they lost the class. Now, if you go into class and there's 3 kids that seem to be somewhat issues, that teacher has it down. They got the 10-80-10 down, right? They got the 3 kids, they're always a chronic problem, they're trying to manage the 3 kids. But when you start seeing the rest of the students, when you start seeing that 80% of the students start making bad decisions, that is when you realize you lost the class. That is when you realize that you lost that 80% and they're moving towards the negative behavior. So with the 10-80-10 rule, your goal should be, once you do the right things, expectation, accountability, consistency, once you have that in place, and then when you actually deal with things, you have calm, assertive energy dealing with it, and maybe you have a script in mind and how you're going to deal with it. You put all those things into place. If you start seeing some results, you will know, because most of the class will be on your side, and you might only have 3 kids not. But until you get to the point, you got to stay with it. All right? Hey, if you need anything, once again, if you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. I got an email I'll put in, you can reach out. If you want to join the teacher community, it's in the description below. Or if you want to even have the free classes in the description below, I am here to help.